Nitpicking 10 new cleansers I've tried. And I guess I say nitpicking because I'm probably assessing them a little bit more intentionally. If I was just using them casually, I don't even think I'd notice half of these things, to be honest. But skincare across the board is getting quite good. So now I'm paying closer attention to some of the details. And, you know, this kind of thing is very personal. So as I go through my list of 10 cleansers and reasons why I like them and don't, I would love to get your feedback because, again, I don't want to come across like what I think is the gospel. It's gospel. It's just, I hope that maybe through the explanation, you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. And then if you disagree, I'd love to know why. Or if you don't like something that I like, I'd also love to know why as well. Anyway, no need to over-explain. I'm just going to get straight into the list now. Starting with the Dr. Dennis Gross Vitamin C Lactic Creamy Cleansing Oil. This has a phenomenal starting texture. It's silky, glossy, just luxurious. When I see it, like visibly, my eyes light up. And it has this sort of citrusy, invigorating scent that I really love as well. Basically just like delightful to apply. But once I start to apply it and start to kind of massage it into my skin, that's where some of the problems start to creep in. It starts to feel a little bit dry and kind of like I'm tugging on my skin as I'm applying it. So it doesn't have as much slip or it's not as loose as I'd expect it to be based on the initial starting texture. And I find that makes it kind of difficult to maneuver. So I'm not able to get that like luxurious massaging effect. Adding water does solve this. Of course, that adds a lot of slip and it begins to emulsify instantly, which is also great because it functions quickly in that way. But then what happens from here is that the emulsifying process is very clingy and just very difficult to remove. To me, it's like the cleanser starts to create like an oily film on the skin, and adding water causes it to kind of repel itself. So it's like I have this white emulsified fluid just stuck to my skin and it's difficult to remove. Now this part is easily solved. You just have to add a little bit more water and then kind of start massaging, emulsifying a little bit more and more, rinsing a little bit more and more. And eventually it does break down and rinse away cleanly. It's just I feel like how clingy this is and really how much water I need to use and how much and just like the extra effort that's required to rinse it off cleanly. That just, to me, isn't quite refined enough. So I think the concept here is really great. It's just maybe the execution is not 100%. And, you know, Dr. Dennis Gross does lean a quite high end on pricing. So just when we're looking at slightly higher price points, I guess I would expect that maybe the whole process would be a little bit more perfected. Now, as I said, this is me nitpicking. I very much still enjoy this cleanser. It's just I think it needed maybe a little bit more development time. And potentially some brands sacrifice the rinsing, the emulsification process just to achieve a different texture. Because of course there are just kind of physical or chemical limitations to how certain ingredients react and behave. But I'm not sure that brands should be releasing products unless they're perfect or close enough to perfect from start to finish. Next up is Drunk Elephant Mello Marula Cream Cleanser. Also has such a beautiful and light starting creamy texture. I very much, love how it looks and feels out of the bottle. And it develops into this gentle and super smooth and soft lather, slightly foamy, but not too obviously foamy. It's probably one of my favorite sort of cream to foam cleansers I've tried. A lot of them have a little bit more of like a shaving foam texture. This doesn't, it's just truly creamy, and then the foam that it develops is also just as gentle as you'd hope for. Except the problem I ran into, and this shocked me, but the eye sting was uncontrollable. I have never experienced worse eye sting in my life. It was painful. And so it's a little bit frustrating that I'm not able to use this cleanser as a first cleanse to remove sunscreen, because anytime it gets near my eyes, it's just it's just terrible. Eye sting tends to be quite a personal thing that not everybody experiences across the board. So that's not necessarily a reason not to try this cleanser. I'm mainly just mentioning it in case you see a lot of reviews talking about the eye sting, because it's not like it was just minor. I felt like I had to actually flush my eyes with water to make them stop hurting, and my eyes were super red and irritated. Now I'm still keeping this cleanser in rotation because I very much enjoy it on my face, but now I've just noted that I need to keep it away from my eye contour entirely. Next up up is the Prequel Skin Pre-Gleanse, which is a cleansing oil in a bottle. And I think this is actually one of the better, more affordable cleansing oils I've used. It's especially an easy pickup if you live in the US. It's just like a really good quality, affordable product. To me, this type of cleanser though isn't super indulgent. I would consider it more of a utility cleanser. So what I mean by that is that the texture feels a little bit artificial. It's extremely fluid and like, I don't know how to describe it, but maybe like a mineral oil style cleanser if you've used those before, how they have this kind of slickness, or even if you can imagine like very fluid runny silicone. That's kind of what this texture reminds me of. And I'm not anti-chemicals. I love chemical textures, all of the things. I love dimethicone and so on. But just for a cleanser, I tend to, like, if I'm choosing, I would tend to prefer ones that feel a little bit more nourishing. But this kind of has a lot of glide and slip on the surface of my skin. And because it is such a fluid texture, it also turns into a very fluid, milky, like runny look and feel when water is added for emulsifying. Now, there is a good side to this because it makes Pre-Gleanse very functional, very efficient and very quick. You just don't get a lot of playtime with it. So it's like you apply the oil, add water, it's pretty much done in a few seconds. So there are definitely some days where I appreciate that, where I'm not really in the mood to do a really long skincare routine and I just want to cleanse and get it over with. That's where I would use Pre-Gleanse. I definitely still have it in my rotation for that reason. Just I would say more often than not, I tend to prefer using oil-based cleansers or cleansing balms where I can actually massage them in thoroughly and give myself like a really decently long cleanse. And because this texture feels that little bit artificial, I don't really want to keep it on my skin for that long. The nice thing is I didn't experience any eye sting. Cloudy vision is very, very minimal. I wouldn't say that it's like 100% residue free, but pretty close to being residue free. The main way that I can describe the residue feeling is that my skin just feels like 5% more slick than it did before cleansing. But that's also fine because when I use a second cleanser, it totally removes that instantly, so it doesn't linger or anything like that. So I feel like I'm not describing this cleanser very well because it's probably coming across negative, but I actually think this is an excellent cleanser for what it is, assuming you don't really want an indulgent cleanse. But as a functional product, totally great. Next up is Rationale number 4, the cleanser, and I think they're calling it number 4, the cream cleanser now. As a creamy, nourishing cleanser, this is outstanding. I think they pretty much nailed it. It's like a true cream cleanser that feels quite nourishing and moisturizing on the skin. There are some cream cleansers in a similar category to this that have like a cold cream style, and they end up feeling a little bit too occlusive and kind of suffocating on the skin. This strikes a really great balance of still being lipid rich, but also light enough, like maybe closer to a gel cream that's still quite moisturizing. And because of that really good balance, I think it would be appropriate across all skin types. It is the type of cleanser that does intentionally nourish the skin. So if you're somebody that really enjoys like a refreshed skin feeling, you won't really get that feeling with this cleanser. But I think it's a perfect one to use in order to soften the blow of acids if you're applying them on top, or even something like a retinoid. Historically, I've used Biologique Recherche Lait VIP O2, which also has a bit of a nourishing effect on my skin. So I guess I would compare this cream cleanser to a lot of the Biologique range. So yeah, I have really no complaints, no notes. I think it's an expertly designed cleanser, just as long as you're in the mood for basically a conditioner for your face. Next up is the Cocokind Oil to Milk Cleanser. Now, I think there are definitely people out there who would enjoy this type of texture. It's like an oily balm that feels a little bit gelled as well. It emulsifies in an instant. In fact, Cocokind even suggests applying it with damp hands to your face. So it pretty much begins to emulsify before you've even properly applied it. The theatre of using this is quite fun, and once upon a time when this type of cleanser used to be quite popular before it was more saturated, like I think Jordan Samuel comes to mind, even Naturium Camellia cleansing oil, they all have a similar texture to this. So yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm a hater because there was a period in my life where I was looking forward to using these products. It's just that across the board, they leave a very heavy film on the skin. I feel like this Cocokind cleanser leaves even more film than I've experienced from the other brands. And it is a true film. It's not a subtle feeling. It's like my skin has been wrapped in like plastic wrap or cling wrap. And I actually find it quite difficult to remove. I can't actually fully remove this cleanser just by using water or just by rinsing and emulsifying. It simply won't come off by itself. And so I have to rely on a follow-up cleanser with a really effective surfactant system to be able to break this down. And so I don't love the idea of using a cleanser to then intentionally have to use a stronger cleanser to remove my cleanse. So yeah, because the film is so strong, it also buries my vision in like this haze. It's almost like fog has unexpectedly developed around me. Potentially, I think people who have more dry skin might not be bothered by the film because it does feel superficially nourishing. But honestly, I don't think these cleansers are really that needed or that effective, just considering they take so much work to use properly. Next up is the Bloomeffects Tulip Nectar Cleansing Cream. This is a fairly delicate cleanser that's not super impactful, and I can't imagine that it would really remove makeup that well because it struggles a little bit to just remove my mineral sunscreen. But I actually still very much love this cleanser and I thoroughly enjoy using it. But I guess I use it more in context. So there are just some days where my skin is feeling a little bit precious or a little bit more sensitive than normal. And that's when I want to reach for something that's super gentle. The best way that I can describe it is that I think this cleanser actually cleans my skin really well. It's just not super efficient or effective at actually removing other things. So as I said, makeup and sunscreen. But I think on bare skin, totally great. So yeah, I would consider it to be more of a situational cleanser, or just if you maybe happen to have naturally delicate skin, it could be one to explore for that reason as well. And I'm sure you might have tried, like Aven has their milk cleanser and those sort of things that are targeting sensitized skin. And I think that's where I would slot this cleanser as well. So it has a place in the market. It's just not like effective enough for me to rely on as a daily cleanser. Next up is the Allies of Skin Vitamin C and Omegas Cleansing Balm. I've enjoyed using this cleanser quite a lot, but there is a but. Having a balm in like a tube format is actually quite convenient. And I think the texture has a good weight to it. It's not too flimsy and light feeling, but it's not too heavy and filmy either. It emulsifies really well, and I think this cleanser is actually able to rinse much more effectively than a lot of other cleansers on the market. It has this like sort of subtle light berry scent that I quite enjoy. In photos, the cleanser looks super smooth and almost gelled and glossy, but the tube that I received had a little bit of a grainy look and feel to it, just very slightly. This hasn't impacted the actual usage of the cleanser. It just isn't quite as silky feeling as I thought it would be. With all that said, the main issue that I ended up having with this cleanser is also related to eye sting. Nowhere near as bad as Drunk Elephant. I can still get away with using this cleanser around my eyes. They just end up feeling a little bit uncomfortable for 10-15 minutes. So yeah, essentially I don't know that I can be bothered using a cleanser where I'm like blinking and watering, when ideally I just want to be able to cleanse, rinse and move on. Next up is the Belle Lune Midnight Orchid Balm to Milk Cleanser. And this is actually the third cleansing balm in Belle Lune's lineup. They're a small indie brand from the UK. This one in particular has a vibrant berry hue and also a really deep berry scent, kind of like steeped tea. I actually really love Belle Lune's cleansers. The textures just suit my preferences really perfectly. I'm still waiting for them to kind of like nail a scent profile that I really love, because all of their cleansers have a certain fragrance to them that I think is naturally developing from the ingredients, but there's not one that I'm like 100% obsessed with. So I like this collection of cleansers mainly because of the texture and its performance. I also think that the quality of oils they're using must be really high, because this texture just feels really indulgent and it kind of feels expensive. I don't know how else to say it. When you actually look at the texture in the jar, if you get it in winter, it is quite a solid appearance. But if they happen to ship it out to you in a warmer month, it starts to melt down and it's like this delicate texture that's barely holding itself together. And I think that probably means they haven't loaded up the formula with a lot of waxes or sort of stability agents, which Some people might find bad because really like anything being sold should be stable enough to sustain weather all across the world. But La Belle Lune does lean a little bit more like naturals in its philosophy, and I think not having some of those stabilizers in here means that the texture feels more natural on the skin. So it's kind of the polar opposite of the Prequel product, which feels artificial. This one just feels much more like you're using a proper oil on your face. Midnight Orchid specifically is the richest of the 3 cleansers they produced, and it does feel like more obviously oily than the others. So that means that it takes a little bit more effort and does leave a little bit more of a conditioning residue than the other 2 in the lineup. But I actually don't find it to be an annoying film whatsoever. So even though I can definitely feel it on my skin a little bit more, because of the quality of the oils, it's not an uncomfortable feeling at all. It's almost just like applying a face oil. And I do find that moving on to my second cleanse is able to remove that feeling entirely. So again, it doesn't linger and it's not clingy in that way. Also, I love that there's no eye sting. So this is one of those cleansers that I really massage in properly. Sometimes I'll leave it on my skin for a good minute or 2 before I even start the emulsifying process. So it's just like a really great cleanser, like really great cleanser feeling to have. It does mean that it is a little bit slower to use. So this is definitely for people that don't mind spending, a minute or so cleansing. But I think it's just, much more indulgent than most. Next one is the Darphin Intral Air Mousse cleanser. Absolutely love this cleanser. First use, I was like tick tick, very much right up my alley. This video also formed part of an Instagram post. So as I was writing that post, I actually looked up the inky of this cleanser for the very first time, and I noticed that it uses sodium methyl cocoyl taurate as like the lead surfactant. Now, I hadn't picked up on this myself, but my Instagram friend Julian, or Dr. Julian Sass, pointed out to me that Build Skincare Bee Wash, the Chanel Water to Foam Cleanser, the Retrograde Cleansing Elixir all use this particular surfactant as the lead one in their formulas too. So it kind of stands to reason that I just have a bias towards this, which happened without me knowing, because I love those 3 cleansers so much. So the fact that this Darphin uses the same surfactant, it just stands to reason that that's one of the key reasons why I love it too. It never occurred to me to actually look at something functional like a surfactant as a reason I love a product, but there you go. And the reason I love it is because I think this surfactant leads to a really cloud-like, soft, creamy wash. So it's just like the most excellent skin feel, and I think if I were developing a cleanser that foams, it would have to use this surfactant. I also don't know if I'm imagining this, but I feel like the cleanser pump on this has a little bit more of a fine point to it. There are a lot of these self-foaming pumps around, but the opening tends to be quite large. I think this one is slightly more pointed in, and it just means that you're able to control a little bit more of the application instead of that mousse getting a little bit out of hand. I don't love when these self-foaming pumps get too fluffy. This cleanser is able to maintain a little bit more of a soft lather that's more creamy feeling. So last one I'll mention is the Chantecaille Rice and Geranium Foaming Cleanser. As the name suggests, this is a foaming cleanser that has kind of physical exfoliating particles in it. The texture is approaching shaving foam, but to me feels a little bit more like a soft meringue before it's developed properly. Slightly gluey and stringy without being sticky, so it's quite an interesting texture anyway. The foam is really rich and just incredibly satisfying to use, and this gives like a super thorough cleanse. I really appreciate the subtle physical exfoliating. It's very fine, so you don't get a lot of it, but it just makes my skin feel great. The only thing is I bought this without reading the volume, and then it arrived in the mail, and I looked at the tube and it was only 70 mils of product, so that's a super small cleanser. At first I thought maybe they'd sent me some sort of deluxe sample, and then I went back to check, and I think that's an unreasonably small amount of volume considering the price point. I know Chantecaille is a luxury brand, but most Chanel cleansers are like 150 ml. Even probably a comparable cleanser like the Tatcha Rice Wash is 120 ml. So this is just way overpriced considering the volume they give. I enjoy the formula, but I absolutely would not recommend, and I would not repurchase myself, because this is Chantecaille being a little bit too stingy. I think across the board we all probably don't love investing too much in cleansers considering how little of time you spend with them. And I don't mind going a little bit luxury with cleansers, but there's a point where the price is too high, the volume is too low, and this is where we've arrived with this particular product. Just like you can be one of those things, not both. That's the end of this video. Thanks again for watching. I would love to hear your feedback on this because I know cleansing is such a personal experience. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.